welcome. Thank you very much for coming along. As I've explained, this event is all part of Richmond Climate Week. So we're doing that. We're going to start the event. If you could keep yourself on mute throughout the meeting, unless you want to speak, just to cut down on background noise. And so basically this event is all about community energy and how to start a community energy group, and also how to start a community energy project as well. So we've got some really great speakers here who know all about it. They're really experienced at it. So we've got Syed Ahmed, who is the Director of Community Energy London. We've got Paul Hallas, who is the Director of SE24, which is a community energy group. We've got Connie from Croydon Community Energy, and we've got Elaine from Cali Energy as well. And they're going to talk through a bit about what they do and how to start up an energy group, a bit about sort of some of the challenges around it, how they've overcome those challenges, some of the projects they've done, stuff like that. And so hopefully that will give you a lot of information and inspiration to start your own community energy group and to get moving on that within Richmond. So just some sort of housekeeping stuff. So if you can keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. If you want to put stuff in the chat, if you've got a question, then please do. If you want to ask a question, then there's not too many of us here, so I think you just unmute yourself and ask a question. I think you should be fine. The session is being recorded. So if you don't want to be seen in the recording, then keep the video turned off, and we're just recording this so that we can share it with other people who couldn't make it this evening. And then, yeah, basically, if you've got questions throughout, then please do ask. So I'm going to hand over to Syed, who will talk through Community Energy London and what they do. Syed.
Yes, Andrew. We've got a very snug evening in terms of people today, which means that hopefully we can get through some of the presentations fairly quickly, colleagues, and then leave it to the Q&A as well. But just to say that first of all, thank you to Connie, Elaine, and Paul. One of the things, I've been working on community energy about 5 or 6 years now. One of the things you find out is community energy is really great, but it doesn't have to take up a lot of your evenings, which is a bit of a challenge. So thank you to colleagues who was presumably doing lots of already evening events with their community energy hats on, and and other activities as well. But I'm going to quickly whip through slides here. He said optimistically on Community Energy London, and to give you a flavour of what we do, except I brought up the wrong one. I thought I was going to bring up the right one. Hold on, I can bring up the right one though. There we go. Okay, can people see my slides? That's great. So Community Energy London, hi, my name's Syed Ahmed. I'm the chair of this August organisation. We are a network of around about 30 community energy groups, delivering projects all around the capital. We haven't been constituted that long. We really started to come together as a network of bringing together as a single voice for the community energy sector in 2016 during the mayoral election at that time. And we then worked with the mayor and to try and help support the sector in London. We established ourselves as a community benefit society in the summer 2019. We have an active board. I'm the chair. We have 2 vice chairs and a treasurer and a secretary. We are very pleased that we managed to secure some funding recently to appoint a coordinator, Catherine Lindsley, who would have joined us here today, but she's come down with a cold, I'm afraid. For those of you who would like to find out more about community energy post this meeting, we've been holding a meeting on the last Thursday of every month. In the good old days when I used to bring bags of crisps and pop, and we were doing it face to face, we used to hold it in City Hall in London Bridge. Now we do it online. And we are effectively trying to make sure that we not only bring a voice to the sector, but build awareness and capacity raise across the different groups in terms of their skills, and try to listen to what kind of things they need, the kind of network organisation to deliver to them to help achieve their ambitions and goals. I'm really pleased to say that we received some funding in the last 12 months from the Greater London Authority, the MCS Foundation, which is the Micro Generation Certification Scheme, and also the National Lottery Climate Action Fund, which pays for our part-time coordinator, Catherine. And there's an awful lot more organisation on communityenergy.london. And just to say, that meeting that we hold once a month, the next one is on November the 25th. It'll be the last one of this year, so please do come along. Details are on our website, communityenergy.london, about how to register for that. This is just a slide showing some of the 30-odd organisations that we have across the capital. Celsi is South East London Community Energy, Crew is Community Renewable Energy Wandsworth, N10 are based up in Muswell Hill, Power Up North London, in Camden and Islington, and so on. So you can see they cover really the whole breadth of London, though we could be stronger in East London. We do have Bromley by Bow Centre there, but really that's an area that I'm really hoping that we can galvanise more community groups come forward to deliver projects. One of the key things about community energy in London is that we've managed to secure support from the public sector. If you look at community energy groups outside of London, they are really struggling because the main support mechanisms for community energy were withdrawn by government in around about 2016, 2017. That's exactly why we came together as a single voice to kind of raise the work that groups were doing with people like the Mayor and also with boroughs. So we are pleased to say that we managed to secure from the Mayor something called the London Community Energy Fund in 2017. That initial tranche of funding for the Mayor has continued because groups have been extremely successful in delivering projects. We have close to 100 projects now that have been come through from the LSEF, and £1 million or so of funding awarded, mostly in feasibility funding, because that's the real difficult bit in getting projects off the ground, the feasibility bit. A new round of funding was launched at the end of September, in fact, 1st of October, with a deadline for applications of 17th November. If you Google London Community Energy Fund, you can find, as it's shown there, the prospectus of how you can apply for funding. So if individuals here representing groups are keen to have a go, they can apply for feasibility funding. And there's also, we're really pleased, a pre-feasibility fund of a few grand. If you've got even a rough idea of a project, the fund can hopefully respond to your needs. What are we doing at CEL? One of the things that we've done over the summer to really help start new groups come together is develop a 10-step guide. So we commissioned some really great project officers to pull together a whole set of different documents and articles, signposting, where you can get additional information from everything about how you build your team, how do you make sure you liaise with your community, choose your project, establish your governance as a group, because one of the things you need to do to get funding is to show that you are a robust organisation with proper governance arrangements, and then continue to develop your project, identify companies to work with, and also monitor and evaluate how successful your project was. There's a web link on the side on communityenergy.london/10-step guide, which will take you to all of those steps are linked to various documents. And that's all I've got to say, really, in that we've been working actively with the groups, and we're really pleased that we have a whole series of new groups coming through. And hence we wanted to kind of highlight to people who are thinking of forming a group the experience of two relatively formed groups, Croydon Community Energy and Cali Energy, and then also get some feedback from Paul from a more established group who've actually gone on to develop something like 7 projects, I think, Paul, to date. And so give you a history of how they started from their first project to carry on. Unless there are any questions, we can either leave it to the end, or I'm happy to take some now from colleagues. If not, I will go straight on to our first speaker. I can't remember who I said, but I'm going to opt for Elaine, if that's okay, because I think she's just started, she just pipped you, Connie, in terms of an organisation that's been set up. So bear with me in a second, and Elaine, I'll bring up your presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you. Everyone, I'm Cali Energy. We're still a very new group. We really kind of started during lockdown, and it was kind of the story of our group was our little WhatsApp group became this. Sorry, this is not me. This is
Was it? I can see Cali Energy.
No, I see Paul. So I see Paul's slides.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Don't
Hold
worry,
on.
don't worry.
Let's find out what I'm doing wrong. I know what I'll do is I will close everybody else's down. So that will mean that I'll bring them up at the time. Give me just 10 seconds.
So really, our group, we were kind of created during lockdown through our little streets WhatsApp group. I think everyone on my street, we were looking for something positive and something to kind of get excited about. That was that was maybe seemed a little aspirational at the time, but certainly something we thought was also possibly achievable. So please, Syed, next slide. And it's like I just really kind of, you know, we've the last. Where are we now? We are in discussions with Islington about putting solar PV onto a local children's center, and that is kind of our focus. And I'll kind of tell you how we got to that from where we kind of started about a year and a half ago. But what we found by talking to people is actually we really first of all had to tell people what we are not. We had a lot of people come to our meetings and been asking questions that really have very little to do with community energy. And so we've really been really upfront about saying, you know, that we are not looking to make a profit, that, you know, we want it to be a project that's viable and stands up on its own 2 feet, but we aren't looking to, this is not a get rich scheme. We are not looking to put solar PV panels necessarily on anybody's house. And that we aren't solar together, we aren't bulk buying solar PV. And we're not going to be asking people for a lot of money. One of the really important things I think to remember about community energy is a lot of times it's about engagement and getting more and more people involved. And that also means having a really low barrier to entry. And certainly in our area, we're based in Islington. And we have within our neighborhood along Caledonian Road, we have a lot of people we have a lot of affluence and we have a lot of poverty. And we want this to be something that everybody can kind of get behind. So we're very, very keen to make sure that any kind of membership in the group or purchase of a share is actually very low priced. So we're actually aiming for like 10, 15 pounds as a minimum. And that there will be a profit, but the profit is going to be more about an investment back into your community. But we do want to make sure everyone gets their money back and potentially a modest bit of interest as well. And though we're also not part of Islington Council, we very much support Islington Council and we want to help them achieve their net zero 2030 aims. But you know, we are just a group of residents who are banding together trying to do something positive. Please, next slide, Syed. And these are sadly not pictures from Cali Energy. These are pictures from Repowering Energy Garden. And this is really what we want to see and what we're trying to share with people, that we really want it to be about training youth. And we want it to be about people getting behind projects, particularly young people. We really feel like this is kind of a moment to, you know, where the world either, you know, takes on the challenge of climate change or doesn't. And the people who are going to be living with it certainly are the young people. So we really see that climate and technology does actually engage younger people. So we think that's super, super important. This is what we're trying to achieve. And we really want to tell a story to our neighborhood about why they should do it. And I think that's really fundamental for any group trying to start is what is that story? What is their aim? And, you know, whether we get solar PV on the building we're looking for or not, it's about creating that story that people can get excited about and get their heads around. Please, next slide, Syed. So then people go, okay, well, if you tell me what Cali Energy isn't, then please tell me what it actually is. And we say it's about Islington investing in their neighbors. So it's all about all of us investing in what we care about. And that's fundamentally our homes and our neighborhoods. And that we want to buy PV cells for Coatbridge House, which is where there's a community center, which is also adjacent to a children's center. And we picked this building, not because it was the biggest, not because it was the most anything, but because we thought the best way of illustrating to people energy is through children, through services, because you can't see electricity, you know, you certainly don't want to touch it. So how do you kind of, in the solar PV on a rooftop, nobody sees it. How do you get people excited about it? We thought actually telling them that it has a real benefit in terms of reducing costs for children or for the community center, then it has something people can kind of understand. And we're doing that because you legally cannot sell electricity to residents unless you're a retail provider. And certainly community energy groups, we can't be that. So we have to find kind of another way of engaging people or giving them something back. And that's a really, really important point. So our aim is to be able to offer training and work experience for a few young adults or teens, and that any additional revenues or profit would be actually reinvested back into the community via a community energy fund. So basically, and then the different members of the community group will be able to vote on how that money is spent. And a really important, I think, aspect to a lot of community energy groups is that everyone has equal vote, no matter how much money they've invested. And so again, it's about investing into our neighborhood. So please, Syed, next slide, please. So why have we chosen this building, and kind of what are we looking at? And this is actually a map from the GLA, from the Solar Opportunity Map. And this is the neighborhood that I live in, and the one that we've chosen to try and do our projects in. And you can see there's certainly a really different typology difference between the west and the east sides of Caledonian Road. The east side are London terraces, kind of, early Victorian, and the west side, it's a very large council estate. And if you look at where the solar opportunity is too, it's very clear which roofs make the most sense. And really one of the reasons why I kind of excited about starting this group is I looked into putting solar PV on my own rooftop, and the return on investment was something like 19 years. And I really thought, okay, yes, I could do that, but wouldn't it be better off I take that money that I'd be investing in my own rooftop and actually put it somewhere where it actually could make a difference, and actually would go to something far more efficient than what I could ever put onto my rooftop. And so we really kind of also share these slides too, kind of saying this is kind of why we've chosen the buildings we are choosing, is because this is also where there's a bit of efficiency and it makes sense. And also where we want to be able to find a way for residents to win and kind of band together across the road, which is such a big social divide. So please, next slide. So this is kind of the project we're trying to do. This is Coatbridge House. And what we're aiming for is to develop a project for about £48,000. And we think that it could, save about 13,500 kilograms of carbon per year. And what we've been talking to Islington about, and they're very open to this, but they're still, I think, trying to figure out their strategy for their housing. So there is, I think, in terms of timing of groups, trying to figure out, how you can best support when there are different strategies and different actions kind of happening at the same time. But the discussions we're having with them is actually, can we sell electricity to them for a better price than they're currently paying to have that electricity from their existing retailer? And we believe we can. So we've kind of come to the point now where we all kind of agree that the project makes sense, this location makes sense, and now we're actually kind of working on what the contract could look like. And that's just kind of, so we are still kind of, in a sense, early days, but we've reached out to our wider neighborhood, and we have a lot more members now. And it's really about just talking and making people know that you're there. And I think, in terms of, councils have a lot of things on their plate, a lot of projects to do, but making sure that people realize that there is real support in your area for a project. And I think that certainly will bring the attention to what you're trying to achieve. So I will just stop right there.
Thanks, Elaine. I will go straight forward to Connie. Give me 1 second, Connie. A bit slow around the computer here. Hold on.
If there are any questions, then please do sort of chip in, and we can take questions as we go if you do want to ask something.
Absolutely. Connie?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Connie. I'm from Croydon Community Energy. Thanks, Elaine, for covering kind of what community energy is, because I didn't really think to do that. I just sort of went straight in. So if you go to the first slide, please. So yeah, just a bit about me. My professional background is in energy supply. I'm also a coordinator for a local climate action group. So similarly to Cali Energy, earlier this year, sort of in lockdown, I wanted to start something that could combine my sort of professional experience with something that will benefit the community. So got us going probably around April time this year. We are currently a member of Community Energy England, Community Energy London, and Community Energy South, which have all been really helpful in providing resources, webinars, talks like this, training, everything. Yeah, really, really good for new groups that want to get set up. We are currently being mentored by the director of Crew Energy through through a program which has been really helpful to getting us off the ground as well. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly do a bit of an overview of the timeline from sort of April to now, and I'll go through each of these pieces one by one. So if you go to the first one, please. This isn't by no means prescriptive, you know, as Syed showed the 10 steps, that was a slightly different order to what we've done, but this is just sort of what we've done and what worked for us. And I'm sure, you know, Elaine or Paul, anyone would say that there's no exact direction. So the first thing I did was lots of research. As I said, yeah, lots on different websites, YouTube videos. I actually spoke to Elaine, I think I found her through Twitter, you know, just to get my head around what community energy is and you know, what the model is and anything. And also just looking to see if anything had been done in Croydon. I found that there was a group that tried to start, I think 2017. So I was really, you know, keen to understand what happened there. And also there's one of our MPs was trying to get it started a few years ago as well. So this was all really, you know, useful information. I then started reaching out using my personal network and social media to find if anybody anybody was interested, and that was through things like WhatsApp and yeah, but initially, you know, managed to find a few people that were interested. I also started just looking at how much it would cost to, say, set up a website, email address, things like that. Next, please. Then started to get a bit more of a solid core team. You know, as with anything voluntary, people sort of drop in and out with their time demands changing. So yeah, everybody I spoke to said that in order to get going, a solid sort of core team is needed. So yeah, we started meeting regularly to sort of find out what skills people had, their interests. I managed to set up a meeting with the group that had sort of failed back in 2017 and did a bit of a lessons learned, which was really helpful. We started to put together a very rough sort of skeleton plan for the next year, including flagging up any funding that we might apply for, like the Community Energy Fund, the London one, at the moment. Oh yeah, and then the lessons learned as a group. So that was sort of the first, yeah, core team. Then we wanted to kind of simultaneously to sorting ourselves out, also start to do a bit of community engagement. So we created an online survey, sort of just to see people's opinions and what they knew about community energy or, you know, locally generated renewable energy. We made lots of posters with links to our social media and the surveys, put them as you know, as well as online. We wanted to reach people that aren't online, so put them up in libraries, shops. You know, it was really key to getting quite a few responses. We just put them everywhere that we could and tried to cover all of the wards. We also emailed a lot. I sort of went through a bit of a map of Croydon, and just with a fine tooth comb over a week or so, just emailed a lot of the churches, schools, you know, anything that I thought might be relevant, just to let them know who we are, what we're doing. We also started looking at if there were going to be any upcoming fairs or events over the summer that we could maybe have a stall at. And then we also hosted 3 online public information sessions to answer people's questions and, yeah, get a bit of a noise going about it. Yeah, then kind of simultaneously, yeah, establishing the brand. So really sort of fine-tuning the website, and we were able to actually start putting real photos rather than just sort of stock images. Got all of our social media, you know, up and running. Got some, yeah, as I said, none of this is prescriptive, so we just decided to get a banner, some t-shirts, leaflets, just to have some things for when we were going to these fairs. And we started looking at things like having a virtual office for when we're ready to incorporate, and when we have some funding as well. Next, please. Then we really started meeting mostly online so far, with potential project sites and partners that we found through the initial community engagement. So as I said, I emailed, I fired out over 300 emails, and 3 sites came back and said that they were really interested. So a mosque, a football club, and a school. So that was, that just to have 3 really keen projects that we are hopefully, still going ahead with. That was really helpful to do that. Through a mixture of networking online and in real life, we found companies like EcoFurb, who help people retrofit, that they target the able to pay market, and we're exploring how we could work with them and sort of refer people that we find as a very small stream of income. And also more recently met with Groundwork London, who help 18 to 24-year-olds in Croydon sort of get work experience. So we're trying to work out how we could maybe help work with them, and if they could shadow anything we're doing. And also started engaging with Croydon Council about working together in the future as well. Then we got out into the community. We did 2 fairs sort of in the late summer, which wasn't bad considering, we only started in April. So yeah, there's a couple of pictures. We handed out lots of leaflets, got a few sign-ups to the mailing list, just heard what people thought, their opinions. And one of them, we had EcoFurb come along as well, which was really good because they haven't sort of been to Croydon much. So yeah, that was good that we managed to have a first couple of face-to-face events. And then the last thing that the position we're at the moment, we decided as a group to become a community benefit society. We don't have our official number yet. We're just waiting for it to be processed, but that's what we're doing. And then we'll be opening a bank account as soon as possible, as soon as we can. We're also, as a group, applying for London Community Energy Fund and hopefully some national lottery funding just to cover some startup costs as well. And we're also organising an AGM/end of year social. So yeah, it has been a lot's happened in the last few months, but that's where we're at. And no official projects yet, but hopefully. And then yeah, next slide please. So yeah, some future aims. We want to obviously get the first 3 projects off the ground and then do some more. We really want to get trained people within the group to carry out things like home energy assessments. I've got my national energy advice exam in December, so that'll be one of them. Yeah, we want to look at fuel poverty work, like running energy cafes, workshops, just helping people, and yeah, maybe working with schools and people like Groundwork to help young people and people that are reskilling to get into sort of greener jobs. So yeah, these are all things that we would love to do in Croydon. And then yeah, if there's any question, and I think on the last slide as well, I've just put some of our if you just flick to the last one.
Oh, apologies.
Oh no, sorry, no, the one after the questions one.
I beg your pardon.
There you go. Yeah, so if anyone also has anything that they want to ask later on, then just put some links there as well.
I think one of the things, just to mention, both Connie and Elaine, they're both established a really strong brand very quickly, and I think that kind of helps, not only in terms of highlighting where you are. Cali Energy, for those who don't know, is linked to Caledonian Road, which is kind of very famous road in North London, and Croydon Community Energy, it does what it says on the tin, and so that really helps in terms of kind of making sure that when you want to go and speak not only to the council but to other local groups, they have a very strong idea of the group and what its aims and achievements are. So yeah, so that's really good. We've got finally our third speaker for the evening is Paul Hallas. Thank you for joining us, Paul. I'll just bring your presentation up. Paul from SE24 Energy has a more established group which we're working 4 or 5 years. They've got a fantastic story in terms of their background. Paul, you start talking while I bring up your presentation, mate.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
You're back on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
don't
Brilliant.
touch anything now, mate. Don't touch anything now.
Yeah. Okay. I carry
Hold
on. So I came to SE24 relatively recently, sort of middle of 2019. So it's more the kind of war stories I hear from other people about the kind of early days. But I hope to give you a little bit of a picture of who we are, what we've done, and the kind of journey we've been on to sort of where we are today. So as Syed said, we've been established quite a long time. So you see 2014, 15, really, we're, the classic sort of community benefit society route, established in 2015. And well, a couple of things really. I think every community energy organization has a slightly different story, and circumstances change. So, if you were setting up a group now, you might not start exactly where we started, back sort of 6 years ago. But I think, the obvious kind of opportunity it seemed to us when we started back then was community solar projects. So you'll see that in a minute. That's really the kind of starting point for SE24 and has been most of our journey. But then, as you'll probably know, I mean, a couple of things have changed. So the government took away a lot of the kind of subsidies. The first, it became less generous, and then they kind of disappeared for rooftop solar. So I think, like a lot of community energy organizations, even kind of established ones, we've had to kind of think about diversification. So some solar projects still work under the community energy model. I'll talk about that in a minute. But a lot of us have had to diversify, and in our case, the main diversification so far has been into energy efficient LED lighting, which has a particularly good fit with local schools. I'm pleased to say, because I won't repeat everything everybody else said about sort of young people and engaging communities and so on, but I mean, that is a tremendous way to go about that. And again, like a lot of other community energy groups, you can see at the bottom there, we sort of put surplus revenue back into the community fund, enabling either our own organization or more often partner organizations to tackle fuel poverty in and around the kind of central South London area. So I mean, obviously that's an important part of what we do. Just in terms of the community investors, so we've now got, I think, off the last round, I think about 80 plus investors, which has been kind of a big increase. We've been very pleased with that. We used to pay, I think, 4% interest, and now it's sort of 3%. I mean, obviously interest rates are, until the Bank of England intervenes, interest rates are kind of unusually low at the moment. So we found that 3% was sufficient for the time being. So this is just going back to what I was saying about the solar PV projects. You can see that we started with a couple of pretty small projects, and I would say that in current circumstances, these probably wouldn't fly. I mean, they still benefit from the subsidies which existed at the time, something called a feed-in tariff. But you can see that over time, we've had to kind of move towards larger solar projects, bigger roofs. And, these days, one of the important success factors is trying to find somewhere where most of the solar electricity is going to be used on site, because if you have to sell it back to the grid, you get paid diddly what's it, and that's not generally good for the economics. So I'll come to that in a minute. If we just go on to the next chart, you'll be able to see this is the sort of 6 projects we've historically done. Now the 2021 projects have been sort of focused on state schools in Southwark. They're all part of the Charter Academy Trust, if you like. So the main one is the charter school in North Dulwich, and there we've got kind of a big solar project which is just nearing the end of its construction phase. And then we've got a couple of energy efficient LED lighting projects the bigger one in Charter again, and a smaller one, and a primary school up near the Borough. And I mean, it's quite a good example here of collaboration between community energy groups in South London. So we work a lot with South East London Community Energy, who've got more expertise in the LED area, and I've also got some sort of paid staff, whereas we're all volunteers. So there's been some very good collaboration there. And I think I've already mentioned that we increased our number of investors to about 80, over 80, and this last year we raised for those projects a total of 240 grand, roughly speaking, as well as benefiting from GLA, London Community Energy Fund grants, which I think have already been mentioned by other people. So I mean, these school projects, I mean, it's great to be able to do something that ties in with young people. It's great to be able to kind of do something that'll make a kind of real difference to hard pressed school budgets. So I mean, in a different ways, obviously the solar and the LED will save the schools quite a bit of money by either substituting or just actually cutting back the need to buy expensive electricity from the grid. And as we all know, bills are going up all the time. So I think hopefully this is a great time to do projects like this, and our community partners will really benefit. And actually, maybe that's just something that I ought to emphasize. I mean, I think that in terms of finding projects, relationships matter a lot. And we've either known people or we've built relationships with people in the various site owners. We've got a very good relationship with our local MP. She's extremely supportive, Helen Hayes. And we've also got sort of outreach activities like other people have mentioned. So one of our directors is chair of the Dulwich and West Norwood Climate Action Group, and we've just had a sort of an all-day session in the local community ahead of COP, as sort of thing other people have already talked about. So this one, hopefully this one will be this last one will be kind of getting out of date now with our new projects. We'll need to update it when they come on stream, but we try to track what we're doing in terms of obviously renewable energy generation, the amount of carbon that gets saved, the help we're providing to people in fuel poverty, and also the kind of reduction, and as I said before, the reduction in energy costs for local community organizations. There might be residents, schools, churches, hospitals, and so on. So we think that's an important part of it, just to kind of make a difference, and that's maybe this is our attempt to try and summarize what we've been doing. I think that's probably enough talking, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Cheers, Paul. I think that gives you I think you've encapsulated the work of SE24 quite. I mean, I only gave you a short period of time, but the amount of work the group has done. And if I remember, Paul, you kind of said you joined lastly, but the original core group came from a cycling group.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed there as well, really, because I'm not much of a cyclist. But the original group had two things in common. They were cycling nuts, and they were passionate about trying to do something to combat dangerous climate change and help the community. So I mean, those kind of things came together really in the foundation. And I'm sure if you go around and get the story from other groups in London, you'll find that you do need that sort of strong core group. And look, there's pros and cons of different approaches. I say we're all volunteers. If the likes of Repowering and Selkie have got paid employees, that probably helps in some ways. So one of the things we're talking about is what is the next stage of our development, whether because we've got new projects and hopefully higher revenues, can we afford some sort of paid support? Because as Syed said, I mean we're all strongly committed, but it is punishing in terms of, you know, volunteer time.
Don't say that. To new
to put
groups,
people
you
off.
are right.
Oh well,
Yeah.
shall I say
It is true, though.
demanding rather than punishing?
No,
but
no, no.
you know that I mean it's, you know, it's just I'm trying to say it's a journey that doesn't end. You know, you've got to sort of, you know, constantly asking yourself, you know, what are we going to be when we grow up, and how are we going to get there? So nothing stays the same. You know, the policy environment has changed, communities changed, the shape of the groups changed a bit, and type of projects we're doing. So I think it's, in a way, it's what makes it exciting, but you never get to the point you say, oh well, like, we've done it, we've got this kind of stable model and it's never going to change. I don't think that's the reality.
Just one quick thing before we open to questions, Andrew, just to say that Paul's absolutely right that the groups predominantly rely on volunteers, but then there are some groups that started from that volunteer basis and then have moved up as they've kind of delivered more projects to semi-professionalize with paid staff. And from my perspective as the chair of Community Energy London, I want more of the groups to be able to access funding to actually be able to hire part-time or full-time people as being the core of the group, to take the load off the volunteers, to take up some of the heavy lifting, and the groups can bring in their skills, ambitions, talent to help deliver those projects. So I mean, an awful lot of what we do is try to find money to then redirect to the groups so that they can build up their own financial resources. So that's something that's really core to my thinking of CEL, to help the groups, you know, have a firmer footing in terms of finances.
Fantastic. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for the presentations and talking us through the journeys that you've been on. It's been yeah, really fascinating to hear that, and the amount of work that people have done to do this sort of stuff. So I think we'll open up to any questions from anyone else, but I was going to start off by asking sort of, what's the best sort of project? I mean, Paul, you've done a few, but what makes a really good project?
Can I just quickly jump in there before I ask colleagues here, but just to say that there's a couple of things that depend about. One, some of the group's ambitions and passions. Two, responding to what their community needs. So different parts of London will have different drivers. So, you know, we've talked an awful lot about solar, but as the subsidies have gone away, a big thing during the pandemic and lockdown is working with vulnerable households on how they can tackle high fuel bills, how they can access energy efficiency grant, how we can help them in providing guidance on how they can do retrofit their homes, how we can be an advocate in terms of their discussions with energy supply companies to arrange payment holidays. So it depends. There's a big there's a broad spectrum of potential projects, and the thing I'm always super impressed about is that the group's ambition to go from everything from local supply to storage to EV charging infrastructure. But I don't know, maybe Connie, is there something in particular in mind that you've seen from the Croydon perspective?
I think for us it's going to be solar and LED, and then maybe heat pumps if they're feasible. But yeah, mostly solar. LED bulbs seem like a relatively quicker win, and then solar, it seems to have more resource to do the project. So,
but it's good to say that you've actually undertaken energy efficiency training yourself as well. That's right, isn't it? Yeah, Elaine.
I think what we're finding is we really want whoever do the project, the other party, to be really excited about it. We had one talk with one school, but it was a there was a diocese behind it who had kind of said, actually, we're just not going to engage these types of projects, whereas the head was really excited about doing it. And so I think, from our perspective, we want to be something that we don't want to force anyone. We want people to want this, and we think there's enough of it out there. And we really want to be a product that people will be able to, like, if you can't see it, to at least be able to talk about it. So a private building is not so interesting for us because people won't know about it. And so we want something that's very visible as much as we can. And for us, that's the important thing. We want to engage. So we're just doing the amount of solar we'll create is a drop in the ocean, right? But it's about getting more and more people to want to do more. And that's really what we're trying to achieve. So we want people to be excited.
Fantastic. The other thing I wanted to ask about was around sort of mentioned around helping fuel poverty. So I'd just like to understand a bit more about what you guys are doing around that, or what has happened around that, because that's obviously going to be a really big thing over the next sort of few months, because energy prices are going up. We're already seeing that now. And so what's the sort of stuff that you do as community energy groups?
I could talk about the project we're doing with Crew.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
I think that Syed probably knows about it already, and some of the people who've come to the last Thursday meetings, because Alex did a presentation about it last month. But Habitats and Heritage are the partner organisation with Crew on that, and we're doing advice for people in fuel poverty or vulnerable consumers across Richmond, Wandsworth and Merton, and we literally just launched it yesterday, the project. So we are hoping to advise people who really need it on that. In the past, our organisation has done more work with community buildings, and we mainly did energy efficiency work. We tended to refer them elsewhere if they wanted solar or something major. But I think the LED upgrade would be really useful. Well, I wonder if Andrew's got more sense of which buildings actually need work, because you're probably more up to date with where the schools are. A lot of the schools had small solar arrays put on them about 10 years ago in the area, but could do with much larger ones.
Yeah, we're actually doing energy audits of all the schools so we can have a really good assessment of where they are and then what the opportunities are, and then kind of presenting those options to the schools to say, sort of, here's sort of a good path for increasing energy efficiency, reducing carbon emissions, stuff like that. So we're currently doing that. I think most of the audits have been done so far, so we're kind of waiting for that to come back now.
Well, I don't know if there's an opportunity to sort of try and kickstart a group by telling them, look, this all needs doing.
Yeah, the
council's not going to do it all. So
that's actually really important, is telling people where to go. I think finding a site is by far the hardest part. Finding a site that people want to do. And if you can say these are our top 5 and they want a project, that would be incredible. And I think a lot of people would contribute their time and their energy and their money.
Cool.
Yeah, maybe just kind of a couple of things on the last few minutes of discussion. So, you know, I think the LEDs, I mean, I didn't, until we started getting into this, I didn't really appreciate what a huge difference it makes. But I mean, if you've got a school which has installed very little sort of energy efficient lighting, and you do the whole building, it can make a huge difference. I think our experience, they're typically going to save about 15% of their electricity consumption, which is massive. And, you know, when you think how hard pressed their budgets are, I mean, you know, and the spin-off benefit is if you've got better quality lighting, and you know, there's a lot of research that says it's, you know, better for the pupils, less eye strain, less headaches, you know, better learning environment. So there's all sorts of benefits that come from that. I think on the fuel poverty thing, you know, in our situation, we're not very well set up to do it ourselves in SC24. So actually, we kind of outsource it to some of our sister community energy groups who've got paid employees. So people who've got, you know, funding for that type of work, and you know, both have paid employees, but also have got very strong roots in the community, because you know, advice and energy centers, you've got to be in a way kind of trusted and accepted by the people who need the help. And you know, we do it through repowering. I saw them on Syed's list, and you know, they're based in Brixton and then North Kensington, if I remember correctly. So you know, they're very, I mean, they're not the only one, but they're one of the groups that's very well set up to do this. So we actually found, rather than trying to do it ourselves, we put money from our community fund into their projects because they do a great job.
I just want to say that the fuel poverty issue has come up in our monthly meetings on a fairly regular basis, Andrew. And as a consequence of that, we've been trying to secure funding for the Community Energy London Fuel Poverty Coordinator. So they can do things like highlight best practice, do a bit of capacity raising on skills, marry groups up together, you know, signpost the relevant kind of projects. So we're just in conversation with GLA potentially about funding that role for about 6 to 8 months. And I just got an email that I'm writing today to another potential funding organisation that we can possibly fund that role for longer term. So again, back to that point about made earlier about it's great community energy groups have such active volunteers, but we do want to try and see where we can get paid posts to kind of support the community energy sector wherever possible. Just to mention as well, in the heating and building strategy, one of the things that was published about 10 days ago, the Chancellor, or I suppose the government, announced something like £2 billion plus worth of funding coming through over the next few years on homes retrofit. And one of the things that CEL is particularly trying to do is to try to get groups to and local authorities to talk to one another, because local authorities are going to be under considerable strain to get the money funded in the most efficient way in the timescales available. And the community energy groups can often highlight in their communities those households who need help, what those household energy types are, what their energy performance certificates might be, routes into hand-holding them and some of the technologies introduced into those houses. So we're trying to make sure that there's a kind of like conveyor belt of like funding from government, going to local government, going down to the individual household, with community energy groups acting as an interface at the local level. Because one of the big things that local authorities are talking about is area-based programs. And if you have an area-based program and you have a community energy group working in that area, why wouldn't you want to use them?
Yeah, absolutely. That comes on to a question I was going to ask you, is around how you identify fuel poverty and how do you sort of target that. So we've got funding around Greenhouse Grant, and so we've done some sort of data analysis around that, so we can target those houses that we think are going to be eligible. But yeah, that's stuff you were seeing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Lindsay.
All the people who are active in groups mentioned solar and LED as strategies for addressing, the fuel consumption and reducing the amount of carbon. But is there anything else in that? I mean, are things like insulation, or is that just too complicated for a community energy group? I mean, what are the limitations in the sense of what you can look at? Because presumably insulation for a lot of areas in London is a big issue because of the age of buildings or the method of building and so on.
Just a quick thought on that. So, and I'll let colleagues jump in as well. So some of the groups have looked at insulating. Some of the groups have, Paul mentioned community energy funds. So from the project, they take an element of the income stream to go into a pot of money when that's viable on the project. That can go to help fund training into households. So, how can you make your home more energy efficient? Where you can access funds to make your home more energy efficient. And there are literally billions of pounds every year that you can potentially access to fund insulation. That's another thing. Thanks, Connie. I understand that. Cheers for coming along this evening. And also groups, I think, Lindsay, that opportunity I just raised now of the retrofit money that's coming from government to councils, there's a significant amount of funding coming through. And so the opportunity I'm trying to raise is that if local authorities are looking to do area-based insulation programs, and if there are groups that are there, both existing and new ones potentially, they could work hand in hand with the local authority. Because the thing is, but much of the insulation programs that we're talking about, external wall insulation, cavity, loft, and so forth, that's significant amounts of money. The groups cannot raise that money for individual homes because there's not a business case. But where the funding streams are coming from government, the groups can work with the local authority to make sure that money is used as efficiently as possible in the homes that need it the most. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, I think so. But I was sort of thinking that in terms of if you're looking at, I don't know, community parts of the community. So everybody mentioned things like schools or like community centres and so on, as opposed to the wider community. So we've got community in two senses, you know.
Yeah,
what
you mean like community buildings, for instance?
Yes. So if you're talking, I mean, obviously you talked about church halls or schools or so on, and a lot of those will have problems with their construction and so on. I was thinking about that and thinking that it's probably an expensive option, but is there a possibility of including that in the range of things?
Absolutely. I think, just to jump in and just say, part of the solution or part of the direction of travel for the community energy groups with an organisation like you're suggesting really depends on where the funding streams might be available. And there are some new funding streams coming from government, something called the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme. And some of that money, that money is coming from local authorities and public sector organisations, but community energy groups can have a hand in there as well, in terms of either hand-holding that school or that centre to actually install some of the things that you're talking about, but also additionally build a community project on top of what's coming from government. So supplement what's coming through with something else on top. So, you know, an awful lot, we don't have a holistic program of support from government for retrofit. Some other countries do. However, in the UK, we do not. So what happens is you tend to get a patchwork of different types of solutions depending on what funding streams are available. And the groups then have to kind of knit that together into a viable project. So even on something like solar, Elaine will probably need to get 3 or 4 different funding routes to make a project viable. The same thing with installation, Lindsay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say
and then
that
separately, you know, I mean, things like Richmond, I think, have been looking at individual households and how they can, but I was thinking more about, are there extra complications when you're looking at, you know, schools and churches and church halls and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, obviously every type of building is different. You know, depends what kind of building it is, when it was built, what standards it was built to, and all that sort of thing. So it's a very kind of a diverse problem. But anyway, I mean, I agree with what Syed said. So I mean, it's a question of trying to marry up two questions. So I think Andrew asked the question: how do you identify people who are fuel poor? Because a lot of the funding is available for fuel poor people living in inefficient homes. I'm sorry. So I mean, you know, that's one question. And then what funding streams are available? And I think, you know, a well-organized local community energy organization can maybe play a role trying to match the two things together. I know that Southeast London Community Energy, I think, have a sort of a home energy, you know, assessment capability, and 1 or 2 other. I think Connie mentioned it before she left. This was something they're looking at in Croydon. So if you have that and you can do that initial assessment, then potentially you can, you know, refer people on to professional installers where funding's available, or work with local authorities to try and help them, you know, leverage this confusing patchwork of different schemes that the government seems to have kind of come up with. It's quite complicated, and you know, I think if community energy is kind of well organized and well informed, it can help kind of be a sort of kind of a middleman and help people to steer through what otherwise looks like a very complex minefield that ordinary people just can't possibly understand.
Lindsay, you've actually just reminded me that the last round of the London Community Energy Fund, 4 churches actually successfully bid for funding. So the churches actually put through a proposal to the London Community Energy Fund for the community or congregation, presumably in this particular instance, to actually retrofit their church. I don't know the detail of what their plans were on all those schemes, but like I'm saying, supplementing some of the routes, or actually filling in the gaps of the things that government is not doing, the Mayor of London and some of the boroughs are doing in providing funding for retrofit. So that's the bit that the groups are hanging on to, where the mayor and boroughs have identified those gaps, and they've helped kind of places of worship, schools, community centres, GP surgeries, leisure centres to access funding, working with community energy groups to develop their projects.
Okay, thank you. That's extremely helpful. I have to say, everybody's been it's very enlightening to hear what people have been doing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your questions. I think we'll wrap it up there because we've run 5 minutes over. So I just want to thank everyone for coming along and giving up your time this evening, and for sharing your experiences and for asking questions and answering the questions as well. It's really, really appreciated. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking part in Richmond Climate Week, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We've got lots of other things going on, so if you are interested in you don't necessarily have to come down to the borough. We've got lots of online stuff, so please do look at the Richmond website and have a look at what we're doing there. And if you want to join in on anything else, please feel free to do so. Just say thank you very much, and have a good rest of the evening.